Good afternoon, dear friends. First of all, I would probably say words of gratitude to those who organize this forum, because I believe that this is a topic that is very pressing and probably a very important topic in the modern world, especially for our state, which has found itself facing a very serious challenge thrown at us by enemies who have united in order to do everything so that we cease to exist as a state. And in this context, I believe that this topic is very important. I want to say that in the modern world, identity is not just a mechanism allowing people to distinguish their own from strangers. It is also a powerful factor of unification, consolidation of citizens around common values, norms, and principles of mutual coexistence based on the nomination of the common historical destiny of the peoples living in the expanses of our boundless motherland, and around responsibility for the present and future of their country, and on a global scale, of all humanity as a whole. The most important mechanism for the formation of identity is culture, united in its diversity over the 12th-century existence of the Russian state, which has absorbed the best achievements and values of the peoples inhabiting the Russian Federation. The most important value component of Russian identity is the understanding of duty to one's motherland and service, common to all peoples inhabiting Russia, which is perceived not simply as an honorable obligation, but as the highest manifestation of civic position, expressed in the readiness to give one's life for the country for the sake of future generations of peace and prosperity. That is precisely why, with the beginning of the special military operation, many citizens of the Russian Federation, regardless of nationality, religion, or financial situation, went as volunteers to the combat zone. The understanding of duty, responsibility, and love for the motherland, common to all of them, did not allow them to make a different choice or postpone their choice until better times, to wait it out, to sit it out. This can be seen in the national and confessional composition of the Akhmat Special Forces, which I have commanded since the first days of the SMO. Here, in one formation, Russians, Chechens, Tuvinians, Bashkirs, Buryats, representatives of more than 70 other nationalities and ethnic groups fight: Christians, Muslims, and Buddhists, career military personnel, and representatives of peaceful civilian professions who took up arms to defend their motherland. I want to note in this context that not only representatives of the Russian state fight in the Akhmat Special Forces, that is, the people in Russia, representatives of all former republics of the Soviet Union serve in this unit, and not only that, we even have representatives of such states as Japan, China, Koreans, whoever we don't have. We are all united by a common idea. They all constitute a combat brotherhood connected by a sense of duty and responsibility. And in response to the question, "Who are you?" they call themselves Russian warriors, Russian officers, Russian generals, regardless of their nationality or ethnic affiliation. This is the power of identity as a unifying factor, and Russian identity as a unique cultural civilizational phenomenon. We can be Ossetians, Avars, Dargins, Yakuts, Mordvins in peaceful life, but outside of severe trials for our motherland, standing in one formation, in the same trenches, shoulder to shoulder, we call ourselves Russians and are proud of it. This is our strength, power, and invincibility. We are Russian. What a delight. Alexander Vasilyevich Suvorov once said. I completely agree with him. I am Apti Alaudinov. I am a son of the Chechen people. All my ancestors lived and are buried in this sacred and blessed land. I am a citizen of the Russian Federation. I am a Russian general. I will stand to the death so that Russian children, Chechen children, Buryat children, children of representatives of all peoples of our state have a peaceful sky above their heads. So that our children play together in Grozny, in Moscow, or in any other city of the Russian Federation, and no one interferes with them, so that the sun is not eclipsed by the shadow of nationalism that has revived in Ukraine through the efforts of the countries of the collective West. And if necessary, I will give my life for this. Identity is what unites us. At the same time, it is important to understand that identity is a tool that is not only unifying, but also dangerous. If it ends up in inexperienced or enemy hands, in principle, we can see that our enemy mainly tries to influence our country precisely in this dimension. The enemy does everything to influence precisely those strings of ours that directly lie in the plane of our identity. National, religious. This is a factor to which we must pay special attention in order to be guided in our work, in our activities, in our lives by precisely those principles that unite us. And not give reason for us to be divided on these, as they say, principles. In the hands of friends, identity will unite. In the hands of enemies, on the contrary, it will divide. And this must be countered. The example of Ukraine, which in just 2 decades, under the influence of the ideological impact of the collective West, turned into a hotbed of nationalism, is a typical example of this. It is before our eyes. We remember what Ukraine was like, how many honest and decent people there were. In principle, we must probably agree that as a people, Ukrainians remain so. But unfortunately, due to the fact that the leadership of this state really is probably precisely the kind of leadership that does everything possible to separate this state from those peoples, states that historically were the closest to them, it led to the picture that has come together in this state today. That is, we see that Ukraine has lost a huge number of precisely the male part of the population. A large part of the country's population has left the Ukrainian state. And what is happening there today can probably only be called terror against precisely the Ukrainian people. But we must understand that the terrorists in this case are those people who once headed this state, absorbed this policy of their Western, as they say, masters, and are leading to the destruction of a state that is fraternal to us. We see what it became, having abandoned its own history and embarked on the path of building a national socialist state, forming a new anti-human Russophobic identity based on the principle of racial exclusivity. Whatever happens to Ukraine in the future, even if it ceases to exist, we must never forget this, so that the roots and shoots of nationalism, mercilessly uprooted by our special military operation, would not sprout somewhere again. Those who do not wish us well will seek to use any opportunity to split our society. Acting on old grievances and traumas, they will tempt us with false values, trying to lure us over to them and abandon true values. That is, they will try to blur and change our identity, so that we forget that we are Russians, Chechens, Tatars, Kalmyks, Orthodox, Muslims, and would become a mass product of Western culture. Without faith, without values, without history, without face, honor, and dignity, as the inhabitants of, for example, the Baltic countries have become today. This must be resisted with all determination. Rejection of our identity, part of which are the spiritual values of Orthodoxy, Islam, and Buddhism, the values of peaceful coexistence, mutual responsibility and support, unique and inherent only to the Russian state, civilization, and understanding of justice, readiness for self-sacrifice for the sake of a great goal, freedom and independence of the motherland, happiness and prosperity of future generations will mean for us death, and not only physical, but the most terrible that can be, spiritual death. This is what our enemies and enviers want and are striving for. But this is precisely what we will never let them do. We know that if we give in to Western propaganda for a second, we will be no more. This is really precisely the most important thing that we must realize first of all. As Alexander Dmitrievich Karachev, head of the administration of the President of the Russian Federation, once correctly said, "Motherland is a concept having the main meaning in our system of identity." This is indeed so. We defend our great motherland, Russia, representing a powerful state civilization, mentally encompassing the space from Lisbon to Vladivostok and Anchorage, carefully keeping in our hearts the small motherland, Moscow, Grozny, Yaroslavl, Vladikavkaz, Urus-Martan, where our relatives and loved ones live, surrounded by honors and respect, elders and children taking their first steps in the big world. And both of these motherlands are dear to us. In conclusion, I would like to note that identity today is in the focus not only of the ideological diversions of the West, but also of the hybrid war being waged against us. I also want to place special emphasis on this, because in the format of hybrid wars that are now deployed all over the world, we see the chaos that is happening everywhere today. Wars, blood. These are the consequences and result of those hybrid wars that are conducted against the states of the world. And of course, today, the main emphasis in these hybrid wars our enemies make is precisely on pressure on Russia, in order to destroy us as a state. In this war, Russian identity confronts the onslaught of pseudo-identities constructed by political technologists and propagandists of Western special services. There is a struggle with the unprecedented in-scale subversive activities of the collective West. In the sphere of ideology, spirituality, culture, the main instruments that appear in operations of information and psychological warfare, in this war, no prisoners are taken. And only specialists who have undergone special training in the field of information operations can defend the motherland. Specialists who have at their disposal centers for organizing and conducting information operations, working no worse than the notorious T-SIPSO. In this case, we will definitely win, and the enemy will be defeated. Because our cause is right, and the obligation to stand to the death for the rightful cause is another key feature and imperative of our Russian identity. Friends, what I want to say. In fact, probably, the Russian state today is surrounded on all sides by our enemies, and the topic that we have raised at this forum today is precisely that component to which we must relate, probably, not as a topic that has become fashionable today because someone decided to voice it, but as a topic that is generally fundamental for us. Because the very existence of our state in the modern world, among those global challenges that humanity throws at us, well, of course, it would be wrong to say humanity, probably the global satanic West united against us, is a very important component for us. Therefore, I hope that we will work precisely in such a way that the result of our activity will bring fruits and victory to our people in the future, to our state as a state that is the foundation for the revival of humanity as a whole in the future. Because the only state where those values that are not sent by God, universal human, family traditions, are still preserved, and which has such a president as Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, who says that we know for ourselves only what we should have, what was passed to us by our ancestors, and emphasizes the preservation of true faith in God, our traditions and customs. I believe that it has no chances for any errors whatsoever, and must do everything to really become the locomotive of the revival of humanity. Friends, thank you for your attention, and of course, I want to wish us all good luck in this endeavor. Thank you.